are still in the first chapter. We may actually get this, well, we might get this chapter, first chapter done this week. We'll see. But we want to talk again about the story, about the decisions that are being made here along the way. And they raise some really interesting life questions for us. And other verses that come up, things, offshoots of what's being talked about here. And we looked up, pretty much at this point, Naomi is going to talk to Ruth and Orpah, her daughter-in-laws, about her decision to go back to Bethlehem, Judah. Mainly because she heard the famine had lifted and that she thought it would be a good thing now that she has no husband and actually has no sons. And it made sense for her to go back to the land that she was in. And that seems, like, from just first reading, it seems like a reasonable decision. And she's a Jew living in Moab, not a very, actually enemies of Israel itself. And she says, finally, it's a good idea. But the question is really whether Ruth and Orpah are going to follow her. And of course, if you look very closely at the text here, what Naomi is saying to Ruth and Orpah is, no, this is not a good idea for you. You need to go back to your, as it says, your mother's house. Go find another husband, live your life, have children. Because this is kind of a personal thing for me to go back. There's no reason for you to go back to where I live, because you never actually lived in Israel. And so we see here that she is trying very hard, in many ways, to dissuade her daughter-in-laws from going back. She's giving them a lot of good reasons, and we've explored this a little bit last week, a lot of good reasons not to go back to Israel. You know, I'm not going to be able to have any more children, so, and even if I did, you're not going to wait 20 years for me to have sons so that you could remarry. So that all seems very unlikely. And of course, underneath all this is the fact that you're Moabite women, you're probably not going to be very welcome anyway. At least I have kinsmen there that can help take care of me. I have the land that Elimelech had, my husband had. So well, I think I'll be okay, is what she's saying. But for you, you're not going to be okay. You're going to be in some rather bad situations. So the question, one of the questions I want to look at here, is Naomi actually giving good advice to them to go back? Because on the surface, remember, she's looking out for the daughter-in-law's best interests, right? That's what we should always be doing with all people. Look out for their best interests and say, you know, is this a good thing for you to do? And she's laying out an argument that says, no, don't go with me. I can go alone. You stay here, live your life, and you'll be better for it. So we'll open up to the floor a little bit. Is this good advice, or is this not so good? You got a microphone going around.
It wasn't so good advice because they had that, I don't know the proper name for it, where the brother was supposed to marry the wife of the one who died and take her in. So she knew about Boaz. So, and there was also another one that Boaz mentioned, unnamed. So she should have taken that tack, in my opinion.
I agree that at the highest level, she didn't give good advice. Our ultimate concern should always be for spiritual welfare. Keeping somebody in Moab isn't going to do anything for that. Taking them to Israel could. And we could say the same thing about Elimelech's.
And as we've talked before, Ruth and Lot have a lot in common here. Not Ruth, I'm sorry, Naomi and Ruth. Naomi and Lot have a lot in common in terms of what they're facing. So, to that question right there, though, the argument could be, well, what has the Lord done actually for Naomi for good? What exactly? I mean, you've lost your husband. We've lost our husbands. We're in the land, by ourselves. What good has the Lord actually done for us? Even though I'm sure Naomi taught them about the Lord God of Israel. But what has your God done for you, actually? Right? Is your life any better? Because you're going to see that Naomi is actually going to even change her name. So, don't even, I'm very bitter now. It's hard. She's lost everything. Basically, from Naomi's standpoint, even though we're talking about the God of Israel, there isn't much of a life for her either, if you think about it. Now, yeah, with the mention about Boaz, they know about Boaz. And again, what's the likelihood from Naomi's standpoint that a near kinsman is going to marry? That is part of the law, but she's not going to have any more children, so she's not going to raise up a lineage, which was the whole point of the Levirate marriage, was to have, children. Can't have any. So what was the whole purpose of that for her? So we're starting to get into some decision making now for the daughter-in-laws. Now the daughter-in-laws are very, very close, it looks like, to Naomi. And we looked up that verse in Titus 2:4-6, which talks about the aging. Let me see if I have a slide. But anyway, it talks about, and we could look that up there in Titus 2. Well, let's see if we can get a reader for that. Titus 2:4-6. This is actually a more practical application of this verse, because we see Naomi doing this with her daughters-in-law. And one more thing before we get a reader. This is interesting because nowadays, when we think of in-laws, we call them outlaws, right? We don't normally associate the idea that you're going to be close with your in-laws. But this is a very different situation. Naomi is a very good mother to the daughters-in-law, more so than probably a Moabitess mother would have been. So let's read there, if we could, Titus 2:4-6. So, and by the way, you might want to keep that a mark in that as we go later on in our story, because especially that part about discreet and chaste, very interesting words that are used there in Titus, and how Naomi is instructing her daughter-in-laws, this is what it's like to be a wife. So when her sons, if she was married to their sons, she would instruct them, here's how to run a household. Here's what you do. Here's what you say. Here's how you should behave. And this is general counsel that we're reading here in Titus in terms of that. So I would argue that Naomi she's looking at what she hopes is the best interest for her daughter-in-laws. She thinks things are not going to go so well if you come with me. Now, Orpah turns back. As Ruth says there in those section of verses, Ruth says, Orpah's turned back to her gods. She'd heard the God of Israel. They both had heard about the God of Israel. They knew that. But she turned back to her mother's house and she said, my mother-in-law, who I respect immensely, is right. I should go back, at least have a life, have something, have children, do something. But Ruth says, no, I'm going to go with you. Now, if you read some of the commentaries on this, and some I think are more bold than others, they say that Naomi really didn't want them to go. Like she was really against this idea, was trying everything she could to have them stay in Moab. In fact, when Ruth is going to go with her, they say that Naomi wasn't happy about this. She wasn't happy that Ruth is going to come because of what she just laid out. Because she can see what's going to happen here. And like what I think what Kara, you're saying, like, consider the life. And we're going to look at this now, what Ruth's response is. But consider the life that Naomi's laying out. Look, you're not going to have any husbands. That no person in Israel is going to marry you. You're not going to have any children. We're going to be going in the fields looking for food. Maybe my kinsman will help me, in terms of living. And then what happens in a few years if I should pass on? Now you're there all alone. You have no one to marry. You're there by yourself. What would the kinsmen, would they even pay attention to you? This is kind of bleak, actually. Go ahead, is it comment? That's right, you can't. But the other part of it, what she's saying is, well, it's one thing for Sarah to have a child at 90, but that isn't the norm, okay? And she actually says to her daughter-in-law, I'm not able to have children. I'm too old for this, right? What man in Israel is going to look at me as a partner? Because I can't provide for them children. That's the whole point of this. Actually, the whole point of marriage was, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. That was part of the purpose of marriage, to have offspring. And she couldn't do that. She just couldn't. I mean, Naomi says, I can't do that.
Pure and all that sort of stuff. So I think there's a chance of being actively persecuted as well in Israel, like with the history of the Midianites.
Yeah, acceptance is an issue here, right? Yeah, so Naomi can, we'll talk later on this. So when they finally make their entry back into Bethlehem, Judah, they know who Naomi is, but who's this other woman? Who's this woman, this Moabite here? What's this all about? So, again, Ruth is going to tell her, I'm going. And this is actually one of the standout verse of the entire book of Ruth. We'll read it here. You probably have read this many times. But Ruth says to her, Naomi, entreat me not to leave you, or turn back from following after you. For wherever you go, I will go, Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts you and me. Now, this particular statement, and of course, after she says this, it says that basically Naomi gave up trying to persuade her to stay, based on what she said here. This has, of course, been used in marriage ceremonies. In fact, you might even suggest that the more traditional marriage vow until death do us part is actually contained in the very end, if anything but death parts you and me. And so, this is a very beautiful confession that she's going to stand by her no matter what it takes. And she even goes on to say about, your people are going to be my people. Well, that sounds good on the surface, but what if her people don't want her, Ruth? I mean, it's okay for her to say that. And then we're going to get this part, we'll get into this part about your God and my God, and the Lord do so to me. So we're going to dig into this a little bit, this little bit of commentary, or you might even say exhortation, that she's saying here to Naomi. So I put this verse up here because I injected it here. I want to know what's the meaning, what's Jesus saying here when he says, for whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. What does that mean? What does it mean to lose your life? What does that mean to lose your life? What does that mean? Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm just going to refer back to the last slide. There was a relationship that had deep roots. So if what Becky was saying is likely true, that Naomi was going through a depression or couldn't see any light at the end of the tunnel, there was a seed that was planted early on in this relationship with Ruth and Naomi. And Ruth is supporting Naomi during this time. And I think that's where the heart of this, look, I'm going to support you. I'm going to go with you, and I'm going to be beside you till the end of our days. And I think that was really the root of why this relationship, why Ruth went with her and Orpah didn't, because it wasn't this same connection that had been established years prior.
I agree. I mean, again, and some texts will say, which we'll talk much later, that she was trying to be the protector, so to speak, of Naomi. Like, I'll take care of her. I'll be your caretaker, if you want to think of it that way, because you're the older mother-in-law, and you need to be taken care of, and I'll take care of you in your life. But this verse, of what Jesus said, what does it mean to lose your life? If you're going to try to save the life you have now, Jesus says you're going to lose it. If you're willing to lose this life, you can gain it. And how much of this is exactly what's before Ruth? What is Ruth doing here? If Ruth says, I'm going to go back, what is Ruth giving up?
This is the call of the disciple, isn't it? Leave mother, father, follow me.
Yeah, it means giving up and making decisions that at a certain level don't make sense. Right? I mean, we can look at all the faithful, and you look what they did, and you say, well, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. From Ruth's viewpoint, well, let's say, and I want to make this point too, I think this is a couple points. I think it was Brother Bill Fair, might have been Richard Fair, years ago at a Bible school, made this comment which stuck with me. He said, ideas have consequences. And this is exactly what Ruth has got. Ruth's idea is, I'm going to go back with you, Naomi. Those have consequences. And of course, Naomi trying to give her, here's the consequence of what you do. Okay? And we all have that. We all make that decision. We have an idea, hey, I'm going to go do this. Nice idea. Let's see what the consequences of that. So what does it mean to lose your life? How much of this in what Naomi is saying, how much of this is an economic decision? Hey, I don't think I can even provide for you. You're going to have to, you're going to have to go out there and get the food for us. There isn't much money here. I don't know what we're going to do. How appealing is it? How much in our lives do we make decisions like this? You can say, I know it's crazy, but I'm going to go in this direction. And let me ask you another question. If an angel of the Lord had appeared at this moment, think it would have made any difference at all? If an angel said to Naomi or to Ruth, go back to Bethlehem, Judah, think that would have made any difference in this story? So you have no reference here of God speaking or an angel coming, none of that. So how much of that plays into this? This is totally, it appears, absent of any angel or God speaking. Can we think of any Bible characters that had this happen and they ignored them? How about this one? So let's go back to Lot. Lot meets the two men. He sees what they do by blinding the people coming around his house. They say, we're going to destroy the city. He goes to his daughter-in-laws and son-in-laws, or daughters and son-in-laws. You got to get out of this place. It's all going to be destroyed. And they say, nah, we'll stay. Finally, the angels take them by the hand, literally, and take them out. The angel says, okay, we want you to go north. And Lot says, I want to go south. Now, stop and think about it for a moment. So, up until this point, Lot is believing these angels that they're going to destroy the city. We got to get out of here. And then the angel says, go this way. And he says, nah, I'm going to go that way. And the angel said, okay, that's what you want to do. They're not forcing Lot to go. By the way, they're trying to tell Lot, go back to Abraham. But he says, nah. We're going to go back to the city down there. You think an angel would make any difference? If an angel appeared for us and said, go do this, how willing are we to say, that's the idea? See, I don't understand Lot in this case. On one hand, within a day, we're talking within a 24-hour period, he says, I know these are angels. I know they did this. I know they're going to destroy the city. And then the angel says, okay, you know all this. Now go north. No, I'm not going to take that idea. Not interested in that idea. This makes no real sense. It really doesn't. I mean, maybe from an economic standpoint, this makes sense. Maybe. But even an angel of the Lord didn't convince Lot to go back to Abraham. Just saying. But again, Jesus' challenges here is that you're going to have to give up your life. You're going to have to make decisions in life that don't seem like good decisions.
This reminds me a little bit of the story where the rich man and Lazarus are there. And even if someone were to come back from the dead and say this or that, some people won't listen. They won't. And in our everyday lives, we talk to angels. They're called brothers and sisters. And they give us good advice, sound advice from the Bible. And sometimes we choose to listen to it. And sometimes we don't. And the story of Lot's wife looking back and the other daughter-in-law of Naomi looking back at Moab and saying, yeah, I guess that's what I want, is an interesting connection. That you want what's familiar. You don't want to leave those things behind.
I would argue in our lives that we want comfortable things. We don't like being uncomfortable. We live our lives and say, you know, as long as I'm at peace and rest and I'm not worried or stressed, there's a lot of stress going on here. You have to think of this. They're under stress. They have no husbands, especially Ruth. She's going back into a land she's never been to before, right? And this has got to be very uncomfortable decision. Uncomfortable in the sense that she's going to help out her mother-in-law, but the rest of her life it's pretty stressful. So Naomi's counsel is no point in being uncomfortable, my daughters. Just go back to your families. Go back to what you know. Go back to your gods. Go back to Moab. Just live your life as you would have, as though this never happened. You never married my sons.
Just another point about Naomi. It sounds like she was just selfless. And that was part of her comment. Look, I don't want to trouble you. I don't want to bother you. You don't have to come with me. But, you know, you think about what had transpired up to that point. Naomi had supported Ruth in her marriage. She had supported her in her husband's death. And it's kind of like, you know, who does she represent to Ruth? And it's kind of, in a way, like Christ. You know, the disciple said, to whom shall we turn? Ruth, you know, knowing her, what she had provided to her in her life, to who else could she turn? And she did it in faith, not knowing what was ahead, but faith in what she'd seen in Naomi, and knew that's where she needed to be.
So anyway, again, the lessons here that we're learning are really important lessons because Naomi has faith. Ruth, likewise, is going to follow in that footsteps of faith, going to a strange place, and starting basically all over.
You say Naomi had faith. I kind of question that a little bit at this point because, I think depression plays a big role in it. You know, she does say in verse 8, go back, may the Lord show you kindness, may the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband. And so, yeah, that sounds right. But then in verse 15, look, your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her. That doesn't make sense.
Right. I mean, she's been teaching all along about the God of Israel.
Yeah.
Obviously, right? And we teach people about the God of Israel and say, our God is our hope. But when things get tough, what decisions will we make? Remember, I think here of Job's wife. You know, the wife says to Job, do you still have your integrity? Curse God and die. I mean, this is what God has brought you. This is why you still following this God? Because look at all the stuff he's done against you. Look at all of what you have, nothing left. And amazingly, and I do agree, amazingly, God kept Job's wife alive. Look at it. Killed her too. No, we're going to keep her alive. And Job is saying, you're a foolish woman. I'm going to continue on believing and trusting the Lord. It's hard decisions. Hard decisions. I want to raise this issue too, because talk about tribulation here. Do we have maybe someone here can read that one for us from above. Acts 14 and 22.
Confirming the souls of the disciples, exhorting them to continue in the faith, and that we must, through much tribulation, enter into the kingdom of God.
I don't want to go through any tribulation. I don't like it. I don't like being under stress. I don't like being concerned about the next day or going to bed at night worrying about this and that and the other. And yet the tribulation of both Naomi and Ruth, I mean, think about it. You're laying down, you don't necessarily know where your next meal or so is going to come from. You're not sure where you're going. You're not sure what God will provide. We say God will provide. But when you go through tribulation, suffering, that's not a real popular thing. As people, we all try to avoid that. We do. We try to avoid suffering, even though, and trials. When we get into trials, ooh, it's a whole other matter. We get into trials and we go, I don't like this, so how can I get out of this? And the Lord does that to correct us and to guide us and change our characters. And sometimes we make, as we see here, we make really bad decisions, and we have the consequence of those bad decisions. So it's not entirely the Lord. Some of that is our own making, right? Elimelech makes a bad decision. Well, guess what? The whole family suffers. And now Naomi's making a good decision. I'm going to go back. And Ruth says, I'm going with you because I think that's a good decision. But it's not easy. It's not fun. It's not comfortable. This is what the Lord is telling us. And so when we have trials and we have things that happen in our life, and all of us have trials, all of us have suffered at some point in our life. We all do. But what's being said here in the Acts, and notice it says here, exhorting them to continue in the faith. I want you to keep going. Yeah, I know you're going to be through some tough times. By the way, they were in some tough times. You had Rome that was coming down very hard upon the Christians. The whole thing about the lions and all the other persecutions on the Christians. It'd be more comfortable to say, yeah, I don't think I want to be a Christian anymore. I think I'll just change. It's safe. I'll play it safe. And what Jesus is basically saying before, you can't play it safe. Whatever. Because safe is the wrong word here. You think in this life that you can play it safe and still get the kingdom. The Lord's saying it doesn't work that way. This is really hard stuff. It's really hard for both Naomi and Ruth. Okay, a couple things in here. If we look at what Ruth is saying here to Naomi, thy people shall be my people. She's talking here particularly about the tribe of Judah. She's saying they're going to be my people now. Okay, it's a nice thought. And then she says, thy God and my God, your God and my God are the same now. And that word God there is Elohim. That's quite interesting. And then she says, the Lord, and we'll get to that Hebrew word in just a moment, Jehovah, do so to me and more, but death part me and thee. Now she's making a vow here. She's making a vow to Naomi. I'm making an oath. I'm telling you, this is what I'm going to do. I'm not going to change. I'm going to do this. And so she's using words here that tell us that Naomi had revealed to Ruth the God of Israel. She told her for the last 10 years, this is the God of Israel. This is his name. This is what he does. Now, I don't want to go too deep in this. I found this interesting, though. So, 3068 is the Hebrew word for Jehovah. You can look that up. And 3069 is the word for Yahweh. But in the Hebrew language, there were no vowels. It's only consonants. You don't have vowels come along until much later in writing it. So when she first says, your God shall be, my God, the Elohim, she's later saying Jehovah. You can go back to the Strong's Concordance on this. But the two words, Yahweh and Jehovah, seem to have somewhat similar lettering. And what's interesting in reading on this, they said that people would use the name Jehovah to avoid saying God's holy name, Yahweh, because it was so holy that they didn't want to say it. They would say God or the Lord in terms of Elohim, but they were afraid to say, which is hard to say, YHWH. It was too holy for them. They avoided saying it because they didn't feel they were worthy to say it. And then you read about the scribes and they went to write the name Yahweh. They would actually change all their utensils. They had to pause because before they would write the name of the Lord himself, which we call Yahweh, the vowels put in for us, if you will, they would not speak that. And it seems here that the suggestion here is that Ruth did not want to actually say the holy name of God directly. She uses some call it Latinized version. There was no Latin back then, but she's using an alternate version that says Jehovah, which would be JHVH rather than YHWH. Again, semantics maybe, but it's interesting to see how the wording is when she's talking to her. And that all came from Naomi. Naomi told her all about this. This is not something she just thought up in her mind. So when she was talking to her, she's very careful what she says. It says, I'm making a vow. I'm going to be with you. And if I break this vow, we'll look at vows a little bit more next week. If I break this vow, God, I want God to punish me. For what it's worth. And we're going to stop right there, and we'll end class on that.